38 Special versus 32 H&R Magnum, and what we have today is our Hornady critical defense ammunition. Our 38 Special is a 110 grain FTX rated at 1,010 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel, and our 32 H&R Magnum is an 80 grain FTX rated at 1150 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. So I'm going to use my 4 1/8 inch Smith & Wesson 686 to test the 38 Special, and my 4.2 inch Ruger SP101 to test the 32 H&R Magnum. We'll see how close these two are to each other. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. So we're going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim in the way or anything like that that could potentially clog a hollow point. Then we'll move on to doing more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents a pectoral muscle. After that, we're going to have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that's going to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so when you're seeing 3 inches and 16 inches, how that relates to an actual living target would be more like 1.5 inch pectoral muscle and 8 inches here. So it's more like a 9.5 inch individual with ribs on the front and back that we're really trying to represent with our real world simulation. So we'll do that plain clear ballistics shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I am going to shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 38 Special. We are rated at 1,010 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. Let's see how close I get to that 1,010 feet per second through my 4 1/8 inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686. So let's see what we get with this. About 5 yards from that target. 982, 992, 963, 986, 987. So a little bit below that rate of velocity. Now our 32 H&R Magnum, we are rated at 1150 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. I'm using my 4.2 inch barrel here. In the past, 4 different times I've ran this ammo in my 1.875 inch barrel Ruger LCR, and the average from all of those 4 tests came out to 972 feet per second. So we'll see if we get more than 972 out of this 4.2 inch barrel and how close we get to 1150 feet per second. So 32 H&R Magnum. 1066, 1039, 1033, 1044, 1044. So yeah, we're about 100 feet per second below its rated velocity. You know, it's maybe 75 feet per second greater than what I got through the little 1.875 snub nose. One thing here though, the recoil is basically none with that 32 H&R Magnum. It's pretty much like shooting a 22. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up we'll do our best potential shot. No denim in the way to potentially clog a hollow point. No rib simulation to slow down potential for penetration. So let's see what we get with our 38 Special. All right, let's hit that with our 32 H&R Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so a little bit subpar penetration with both of these, to be honest here. I was hoping for a little bit better than that. Performance isn't greatly different between both of these here. You know, our energy dump on the bottom with our 38 and then our 32 H&R Magnum. You know, the 38's going to have a little more energy dump, but it's not a significantly amount more. And then we have some busted off pieces of petals with that 38 Special, and that is one of the hallmarks of critical defense. They make it with kind of a thin jacket so it can expand out. We did get some expansion. Our total track though goes right to 12 inches exactly. I know camera parallax at this angle will push that up to maybe it looks like 13 inches from the center of this camera, but from a straight on view here, we are right at 12 inches exactly. With our 32 H&R Magnum, we actually hit 13 inches, so we got a little bit better performance with our 32 H&R Magnum, albeit the damage isn't quite as good. So let's do our real world simulation. We'll put in our rib simulations, put on our denim, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting skin and a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard at the back of that 16-inch block to represent hitting back ribs. So let's see how our 38 Special does in our real world simulation. All right. 32 H&R Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so we had kind of a similar difference there between these two that we had in plain gel, except with this, what I'm actually seeing is the same amount of energy dump in this first 3 inches. So it's almost like with the 38 Special, you know, it's at a velocity where that denim can kind of affect that just a little bit. As it seems like with our 32 H&R Magnum, we're moving faster, so it's still imparting a lot of damage going on in there. And we looked through our rib simulation. Both of them are definitely expanding. Our hole through with our 38 Special is definitely much greater than our 32 H&R Magnum. But both of them definitely were expanding as they hit that. So our 38 Special have almost the same performance. These both look like they went about a 1/2 inch more, because with our 38 Special, we're right there at about 12.5 inches. And we have some good expansion. When we look at our 32 H&R Magnum, we're right there at about 13.5 inches. So we gained a 1/2 inch of penetration just by lowering that expansion threshold a little bit. But very nice here because they both stayed very consistent. So when we look at our plain clear ballistic shot, it definitely looks like our 38 Special did a lot better. But when we move on to our real world simulation, you know, it looks like that 32 H&R Magnum is actually doing 90% of what that 38's doing. And we had a lot less recoil. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'm going to shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these, see if the lower recoil really helps me out with placing shots. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 38 Special and our 32 H&R Magnum. So these both had really fantastic expansion. Our 38 Special, really good, consistent expansion. And our 32 H&R Magnum also had really good, consistent expansion. 38's a little bit bigger, obviously, because it started bigger. But both are really performing exactly as they are designed to do. So one thing that we don't always see very often with testing like this is consistency. We often see a huge difference in the performance going through denim and rib simulation. And with these, there's almost no change here. 38 Special, 32 H&R Magnum. So our 38 Special here, almost exactly the same performance, maybe even bigger expansion, little deformation going on there. 32 H&R Magnum, again, just really consistent performance. So if we compare our 38 Special through plain gel versus the one going through our rib simulation, rib simulation one looks a little bit bigger to me. So it just remained consistent and performed really well. We look at our 32 H&R Magnum here. This is our plain gel one here and our real world simulation here. Maybe a tad smaller going through our real world simulation, but extremely consistent overall. So this is some of the best performing, just basic 32 H&R and 38 Special I've seen. Really good performance. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm going to see if that difference in recoil really helps me out when doing some rapid fire. And by the way, the Smith & Wesson 686 is like 39 ounces, 39 and a half, something like that, as where this SP101 is 29 and a half ounces. So even with 10 ounces less of weight, that 32 H&R Magnum has less felt recoil for me. But I'm going to line these sights up, pop these off as fast as I think I can get, you know, shots on target, and see how these compare. So 38 special. So I did something there that I never ever do with this Smith & Wesson. I short stroked that trigger. So we're clear here. I didn't let it fully reset, and then I pulled it back again. I think that's partly just due to the SP101 having such a different trigger. I've been messing with that lately, so it's just kind of throwing me off a little bit. But very easy to shoot, almost no recoil even with that. So our 32 H&R Magnum, let's see how this does. All right, so I didn't do quite as good with that. And I think part of that is just this SP101 trigger. I'm pulling them a little bit high. I did miss one as well. Honestly, when I'm doing this, though, I'm not seeing a big difference there in the recoil that I'm feeling. But, of course, you know, who's going to want to carry around a 39-ounce revolver? This, maybe, because if you look at the size, you know, both of these are 6 shots. You look at the thickness of these things. I mean, there's a pretty big difference here in the overall size, even though these are both 4-inch barrels. This is like a massive sized gun. This one's kind of small. So yeah, I'd say this is pretty comparable to the recoil of 38 Special from this. So let me back it up a little bit and see how these continue to shoot for me from a little more distance. All right, 40 yards from the target, kind of our dick and drill distance. I'm not going to do the dick and drill, but you know, that's how far that is, 40 yards. So hopefully this will be a little bit more fair, where I can do some slower fire with the trigger. So that'll give us a good idea of, you know, the potential accuracy of these things. So 38 Special, 40 yards. Let's see how I can do this. All right, so I aimed center mass, and they are hitting just a little bit low for me. 32 H&R Magnum. Let's see what this does for me. All right, I would say about the same level of accuracy. Aiming center, hitting just a little bit low, so almost identical there. Let me back it up. I got a few rounds left. We'll shoot from 75 yards, see how these do from a good amount of distance. All right, 75 yards from the target. So these were hitting a little bit low for me at 40 yards. So I am going to aim kind of upper shoulders on that silhouette and see if I can make any hits with these. So 38 Special. See how I can do with this. So those are pretty accurate, and they did drop a little bit because my point of aim is a little bit higher than where it was at 40 yards. So not bad overall. Those feel really good in this particular revolver. 32 H&R Magnum. Let's see what this does. All right, so those are really accurate as well. It's funny just how little this recoil is. I would say still, overall, it is a little bit less than 38 Special. And I am using the 38 Special standard pressure. So you got to understand, 38 Special standard pressure, 110 grain, which is a light bullet, out of a revolver that's almost 40 ounces, you know, that's not going to have very much recoil. So to have less than that out of this, and this is absolutely perfect. You know, I would definitely recommend something like this to maybe a small statured person that wants a decent home defense gun with a good amount of sight radius. and almost no recoil, but definitely a lot better terminal ballistics than like a 22. This is your answer. This is really, really good overall. It's kind of one of those cheat codes in the firearms world where it doesn't make any sense. You know, 357 SIG's kind of like that too. It doesn't make any sense how it's so powerful while it has such low recoil, and it just has to do with the design of the cartridge. So overall, I would say both of these options are absolutely fantastic out of a 4-inch revolver. And I'm going to say, I think that, you know, I've tested the Plus P version of the 38 Special and this 4-inch revolver. I didn't bring that out today, even though that's kind of more fair because, you know, the 32 H&R Magnum is roughly the pressure of a 38 Plus P, and the 38 standard pressure has less pressure. But I wanted to kind of be fair there with, you know, not having one that's a Plus P and see how these do. Plus, I'm thinking, you know, when you have a long enough barrel, you really don't need that Plus P. Yes, you'll get better performance, but what I'm saying is when you use the standard pressure of a 4-inch barrel, typically they seem to be more accurate than the Plus Ps. I don't know why that is necessarily. It's just, they just seem like more accurate. That could have to do with me flinching less, and maybe I just think they're more accurate. But overall, both of these seem to perform fantastic out of 4-inch barrels. You know, going less than 4-inch barrel, you know, I did test this 32 H&R mag in the snub, and it did pretty well, but not as consistent as it did out of the 4-inch barrel. Same thing with the 38 Special. You know, it can work pretty well, but once we incorporate that denim in the rib simulation, they typically don't perform. So 4-inch barrel is really where it's at with these, and I think, you know, you're just right where you need to be for really good performance. So I'm really impressed with these rounds overall. So very interesting. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.